Well, hi, Wylie. It's Grandpa. I've got another story for you. I hope you've been enjoying the stories, and I sure do enjoy getting a chance to read them for you. And there's plenty more, so I'll keep going. This time I thought we would talk about Peter Rabbit. There's a movie out right now that people are enjoying about Peter Rabbit, and it's an old story, one from when I was a boy. And so I think you'll like it. It's a story about a little boy rabbit who doesn't behave too well, and he gets in trouble. Ooh, let's find out what happened. Let me show you something. Oh, look, I've got a couple of little friends. I've got my little friend here. Got a little bunny here to help us get in the mood. And over here, I'm going to show you the picture. This is actually the picture of the cover of the book. And if you look right there, you'll see that's Peter Rabbit. You see he's got a blue coat with shiny buttons on it, and he's eating some carrots, and he's in the garden, and over there is Mr. McGregor. You're going to meet him. He's working hard in his garden, and there's some birds and other creatures that are there in the garden. So we'll meet all of them as we tell the story, but now you've seen them, so you know who we're going to meet, okay? So here we go. This is the story of Peter Rabbit. Once upon a time, there were 4 little rabbits, and their names were Flopsy, Mopsy, Cottontail, and Peter. And the 4 little rabbits lived with their mother in a sandbank underneath the root of a very big fir tree. That means that they lived in a hole in the ground, and that's where rabbits live. They dig a hole down into the ground, and they make a little house for themselves under the ground. Now, my dears, said old Mrs. Rabbit one morning, you may go into the fields, or you may go down the lane, but don't go into Mr. McGregor's garden. Your father had an accident there, and he wound up being put into a pie by Mrs. McGregor. No more about that. Just, Mother said, don't go to Mr. McGregor's garden. Now run along, and don't get into mischief. I'm going out. Then old Mrs. Rabbit took a basket and her umbrella, and she went through the wood to the baker's, which is kind of like going to the store. She went to get some bread. She bought a loaf of brown bread and 5 buns so that they could each have one. Flopsy, Mopsy, and Cottontail, who were all good little bunnies, went down the lane to gather blackberries. They went down to pick berries right off the bushes. Blackberries, they really taste good. But Peter, who was a naughty little rabbit, ran straight away. Guess where he went? He went to Mr. McGregor's garden, where he wasn't supposed to go, and he squeezed under the gate. We have a bunny that does that here at our house. He squeezes under our gate and gets in the backyard, and then when the dogs chase him, he runs real fast and squeezes under the gate to get away. Well, that's kind of what Peter had in mind. But now he's in Mr. McGregor's garden. And he looked around, and boy, there was a lot of food, because that's what grows in a garden, is a lot of things you can eat. So first, he ate some lettuce, and then he ate some French beans, and then he ate some radishes, and then, starting to feel kind of sick because he ate so much, he went to look for some parsley to eat, but around the end of the row, who should he meet? Mr. McGregor. Mr. McGregor was on his hands and knees. He was planting little young cabbages, but he jumped up and he ran after Peter. He was waving a rake and he yelled, "Stop, thief!" Well, Peter was most dreadfully frightened. He was scared to death, and he rushed all over the garden trying to get away. He forgot how to get out. He forgot the way to the gate. He didn't know what to do. He lost one of his shoes among the cabbages, and then he kept running, and he lost the other shoe in the potatoes. Well, after losing his shoes, he actually was on 4 legs now, which is the way rabbits are supposed to be, so he could run faster. So I think he might have gotten away if he hadn't run into some string and net and stuff there that he got caught up in. He got caught by the buttons. Those buttons that I showed you, that shiny button on his jacket, it caught in a net, and he couldn't get away. He had his blue jacket, brass buttons, pretty new as a matter of fact. His mom had just gotten it for him. Well, Peter thought he was lost. He started to cry, big tears. And his tears, his sobbing, were overheard by some friendly sparrows. You know what sparrows are? They're birds. And the birds came down all excited and said, "Come on, you can get away." Well, Mr. McGregor came up to it with a bucket that he was going to put on top of Peter and catch him. But Peter got out just in time, losing his jacket behind him, though. So now he's lost both shoes and his jacket. And he rushed into the tool shed, little building out there, and he jumped into a big can, which would have been a pretty good place to hide, except that it was full of water. Oh no, now he's all wet. Well, Mr. McGregor was pretty sure that Peter was in there somewhere in that tool shed, maybe hidden under a flower pot. So he started turning over the flower pots, one at a time. Look, see, he's into there. Here's another one. He turned the pot over. Uh-oh, there's Molly barking. You hear Molly barking in the background? That's our dogs, Molly and Trisket. They bark when anything moves out in the street. Anyway, he didn't find Peter because he was hidden in the can, but he was all wet and he was getting cold. And all of a sudden, Peter sneezed. Ka-shoo! And Mr. McGregor was after him in no time. And he tried to put his foot on Peter, who jumped out a window, upsetting 3 plants. The window was too small for Mr. McGregor to get out, and he was tired anyway of running after Peter, so he gave up. He went back to his work. Peter sat down to rest. He was out of breath. He was shaking. He was so scared, and he didn't have any idea which way to go. He was lost, and he was really all wet and cold from sitting in that can. After a while, he just started kind of sneaking around in the garden, going not lippity-lippity, it says, not very fast. And he was looking all around. He found a door in the wall. Uh-oh, the door was locked. That didn't work. And there was no room for a fat little rabbit like Peter to squeeze underneath. He's fatter now because he's been eating all those vegetables. There was a little old mouse running in and out over the doorstep of that, under the door there, and carrying peas and beans to her family in the woods. So she was helping herself to the garden as well and taking it out to her little baby mice in the woods. And Peter says, "Which way to the gate?" But she had such a big pea in her mouth, she couldn't even answer. Oh. She just shook her head. She didn't know. And poor Peter, he just started to cry. Well, there he was. Then he decided that he had to find his way straight across the garden. But he became more and more confused. Finally, he came to this little pond, a little, just like a little pool of water there, where Mr. McGregor filled his water cans up. And there was a white cat. The cat was just staring into the water, looking at some fish that were swimming around. Now, you have a cat. I bet you've seen your cat staring at, maybe at a bird or something like that. So she sat very, very still. But now and then, the tip of her tail twitched like it was alive. Just her tail would go like that. Peter thought it was best to just leave the cat alone. He'd heard about cats from his cousin, little Benjamin Bunny, and he said, "I'll just leave the cat alone." He went back toward the tool shed, but suddenly, quite close to him, he heard the noise of a hoe. And a hoe is kind of like a rake that you use in the garden. Peter sneaked under the bushes. Presently, nothing happened, so he came out and he climbed up on a wheelbarrow and he looked over the edge. The first thing he saw was Mr. McGregor hoeing onions. His back was turned toward Peter, and on the other side of him was the gate. He found the gate, but Mr. McGregor's in the middle. He's got to get past Mr. McGregor to get to the gate. So he got down very quietly off the wheelbarrow, and he started running as fast as he could go. along a straight walk behind some bushes. And Mr. McGregor suddenly caught sight of him at the corner, but Peter didn't care. He just kept running. He slipped underneath the gate and was safe at last in the woods outside the garden. Whew! He made it. Mr. McGregor hung up the little jacket and the shoes that Peter left behind. He put them on a little scarecrow to scare away the birds. Peter never stopped running. He never looked behind him, all the way till he got home to the big fir tree. He was so tired that he just flopped down on the nice, soft sand on the floor of the rabbit hole, and he shut his eyes. His mother was busy cooking. She wondered what he had done with his clothes. Oh, that Peter. It was the second little jacket and pair of shoes that he'd lost in the last week or so. I'm sorry to say, Peter was not very well that evening. He didn't feel too good. He ate too much. He was scared. He ran. He was worn out. So his mother put him to bed, made him some chamomile tea, which is very nice. I like to have some of that before I go to bed at night. It helps you sleep. And she gave some of that to Peter. 1 tablespoon to be taken at bedtime. And that's what he did, and he went out to sleep. You remember Flopsy, Mopsy, and Cottontail, though? The good little bunnies? They had bread and milk and blackberries for supper. That was good. That's the end. That's the story of Peter Rabbit, the naughty little rabbit. Don't you be a naughty little rabbit. You be good. Of course you will. I hope you enjoyed that story. We'll have more stories coming up soon. It's Grandpa Marty saying goodbye. Say hello to your mom and dad for me.